So good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well despite current circumstances. The sun is shining today, as Derek pointed out, which we can be thankful for that. For those who don't know me, I'm Kristen Feierabend with North Carolina Cooperative Extension and part of our Social and Economic Vitality team here in Wake County. And social and economic vitality, for the purposes of the recording, is a kind of a multi-tiered collaborative effort to eliminate intergenerational poverty in Southeast Raleigh and the eastern part of Wake County. So the municipalities of Knightdale, Wendell, Zebulon, and we try to make sure that our strategies are holistic in nature, community-driven, and really focused on supporting thriving families, thriving nonprofits, thriving small businesses, and ultimately thriving communities. And so today we are kind of taking a next step on a conversation that we started back in April with Rob from ReCity. And today I think we really want to go a little bit deeper. We have a couple of guests from the ReCity Network here today to share their experience as being members of that network. And then hopefully Rob can go into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of if we were interested in partnership, what would that look like? How would it get started? And hopefully we can have some discussion of whether that's of interest in Raleigh and who some of the other partners are that might need to be at the table if we want to continue that conversation. And we have a small group with us here today so far, so I actually think I will have us do just quick introductions, maybe your name and organization would be awesome. So I will go down the list. If Ani, you want to start?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, guys. My name is Ani Kurjilian. I am AmeriCorps Vista, working with Kristen on the Social and Economic Vitality team in Eastern Wake County.
Thanks, Ani. The Cliff Lavenhouse could go next.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am the Cliff Lavenhouse, and I'm a social advocate in the Southeast Raleigh area. Of course, I'm working with several nonprofits and focused on volunteering and working with social economic vitality to understand how it's being rolled out in the community.
Thank you, Cliff. Derek?
Derek Bird, the Executive Director for the Family Resource Center, South Atlanta.
Awesome. Jen?
Hey everybody, I'm Jen Scoggins. I am the Academic and Leadership Program Coordinator at the Institute for Nonprofits at NC State. Had the pleasure of working with Kristen, and I see Cliff and Angela, a few of our other folks that we've worked with the Wake Grassroots Leadership Academy.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Julie? Oh, I think you're still muted. Can you all hear her? Okay, she'll come back. Dr. Perkins.
Greetings, everyone. I hope you can hear me and I don't sound like a chipmunk. Good. Great to see everyone. Particularly thrilled to see Syretta Hill. Haven't seen you in quite a while. You look like you're hanging well there over in Durham or maybe on the coast, something like that. I am professor at NC State University. I'm leading our community university partnership with social economic vitality. And I'll just say, Rob, I was supposed to follow back up with you after your last meeting with us. After having viewed all the materials, it kind of answered my questions. I knew this one was coming up, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Rob?
Hi, everybody. Rob Shields. For those of you who just getting a chance to connect with today that weren't on the call last time, Executive Director of ReCity Network in Durham. Been doing that work for 5 years. Our co-working space downtown has been operational for 4. And the 2 guests that we have with us today actually have been with us. Since very day one. We've been doing some of that assessment work, and their applications came in to join the network the first month that we opened. So it's pretty neat. They're part of a very small group of 4 organizations. So you're speaking with 50% of our launch team today, which is pretty exciting. Hard to believe it's been 4 years. Syretta and Julie, you haven't aged a day. Okay, I feel like I'm 50 years older. But
thank you, Rob. And Syretta?
Hey everyone, Dr. Brookins, it's so amazing to see you again. This is taking me back to my work in Wake County. Executive Director of StepUp Durham. We do employment training and placement services. Glad to meet everyone and see some folks I haven't seen in a while.
Thank you for being here. Angela? I think you're muted.
I'm Angela Morrow, one of the original members of GNLA, and also the co-founder, co-creator of Choice Not Chance, a male conference that Mindy Fuller and I put on every year with Wake County. This was the first year we did not put it on, but we focus on Black males ages 8 to 18.
Awesome. And Wanda?
Yes, my name is Wanda Hunter, and I'm a community advocate here in Raleigh in Lake County, and I'm just glad to be here on the conversation to do the deeper dive about ReCity.
Awesome. Thank you. And then let's see if Julie, if we can hear you.
How about now?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great, just had to reboot it. Hi, I'm Julie Wells. I am the executive director of an organization called Partners for Youth Opportunity in Durham, and been partners at ReCity, like Rob said, since the beginning. And then on the side, I have created and worked with ReCity and Duke and the Helius Foundation on the Unity Fellowship, which is a intensive to help nonprofits become more sustainable.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And if Denise's microphone is working, since she just joined us, if Denise, you want to introduce yourself? I'll give you a second.
My name is Denise Ball.
Welcome, Denise.
Concerned citizen. Thank you.
And Kristen, I'm not sure if you saw my note, but it looks like we might have one additional guest from ReCity that is able to join. So if you see him knocking on the waiting room door, if you wouldn't mind letting him in.
I will do that. Thank you. Awesome. Wonderful. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. We have a great group on here, a mix of Crosby advocacy group members, grassroots nonprofit, Leadership Academy alums, and obviously some ReCity folks for the conversation. And in terms of our agenda, I think we're going to have Rob kick us off with just a very short recap of ReCity, just so that we have the basics fresh in our mind. But then we want to have a conversation with Julie and Syretta about their experience as network members, and then kind of an open discussion on what y'all are thinking about in terms of Raleigh and ReCity partnership opportunities. And then Rob can take us through maybe toward the end about if we are interested in continuing the conversation, what are some of the first steps that we would need to take to do that. So Rob, you want to start with a short update or recap?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can keep it very short. I'm assuming that most people on the call, if you signed up for a deeper dive webinar, you probably don't do that unless you have some surface level interest or understanding of what we're doing. But just a quick recap. ReCity is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that started back in 2014 officially. That is when we began laying the relational groundwork for what is now our physical co-working space in downtown Durham. And it really formed as a response to some of the needs that were arising in Durham, and some of the research that had pointed out the disconnection that existed between nonprofits, maybe not primarily, but that was the main focus of the research, and just the sheer volume of organizations trying to do good work in the community. But oftentimes that work ends up being siloed and disconnected, and therefore it reduces the collective impact and the shared impact that everyone could have if they're working together in community. And so ReCity formed in response to helping to address a part of the solution there, which is forming a relational network that could be housed in a single location where organizations could be in close proximity to each other, get to know each other on a foundational level, one-to-one. I've said since the very beginning that organizations don't partner together, people do. And so the people that are on this call today have been with us on that journey from the very beginning. Before we had a building, it was actually, we were doing meetings like this, where we would meet in coffee shops and we're talking about this vision. And actually, that was a vision that was shared by these individuals. They already saw that this needed to be addressed. And so they were able to have the foresight to say, we could see this is going to help make us stronger as organizations, but also be better for Durham if we do come together and find ways that we can collaborate and just pursue shared impact together. So we started with 4 organizations back in April 2016 when we officially found the space. Took 2 years in the Durham real estate market to find the right spot that was the right location, that checked off all the boxes that we had been hearing from local organizations. And then once we found it, the people on this call really are why we're still here, because they are not only good at what they do, and they are serving the community well and have the trust and respect of many others. They really were the reason why they just kept telling other people about the opportunity. And so the numbers grew steadily. We're now at 46 organizations that are officially part of our network, comprised of 126 community leaders. And so three of them are on the call today. We're along the way, we're just trying to find out ways we can continue to improve our model. And right now we're in a very interesting time where we are figuring out what it looks like to pursue community and build it from quarantine. And you can't rely on a shared space anymore, but we're very thankful to see that our network is still relying on the trusted relationships that they have built over the last 4 years to be able to pursue collaboration. And when that trust has already been built, leaning into those relationships have been, I think, incredibly fruitful for our network on the whole, which has been really encouraging to see. And I definitely miss these guys, and hope that we can all get back together and share cups of coffee at ReCity in the near future.
Awesome. Any questions for Rob at this point, kind of clarifications, basic questions before we start talking with partners?
This is Cliff. Rob, when you started out with 4, a group of 4, or what was the number of startups?
Yeah, 4 organizations. I wouldn't say startup would describe all of them. They were all in different life cycles as organizations. I would say several of them were early stage, but folks like Partners for Youth Opportunity and Julie, who you'll hear from in a second, was a mature organization that had been around a long time, already gone through a successful merger, and so had a great reputation in the community and had been doing work for a while. So yeah, 4 organizations that moved in initially. We obviously had existing relationships with a good many others that were considering it, but these were the first 4. It wasn't long before we saw a wave of newcomers coming in the months to follow. But 4 organizations kind of get the credit of saying, we'll jump in right with you before we even see any results. We believe in this, and we want to help you start this and make it what it is. And so it was a relatively short list of people who were with us from the very beginning.
All right, so you were the director from the beginning, or the lead from the beginning?
Yes. I was hired by our board of directors as the founding executive director, and so been the only executive director for the last 5 years.
Thank you.
Kristen, I have a question. Rob, do you receive any support from either the city or the county of Durham?
It depends on how you define support. Financial support, no. The city of Durham does not provide grants to nonprofits. If that has changed, someone please let me know. But I don't. They don't write checks, so they're ineligible for direct funding. The county does. We have never received direct financial support or any type of financial compensation from either the city or the county. However, I will say that city leaders, I think, are very supportive of what we do. I mean, it's hard to speak on behalf of all of them, but I know that Mayor Schul is very supportive of our work, is very supportive of all the organizations that are at ReCity, which I think is why ReCity has his support, because he sees the work that Julie, Geraud, Syretta are doing, and the fact that he trusts them and that they're coming together. I think that's how he started to trust and appreciate ReCity. So it really moved from relationships that he already knew. But county commissioners, et cetera, there are a lot of people that are coming in and out and have different levels of endorsement for ReCity, but if that helps to answer your question.
Awesome. Any other questions at this point? If not, I think I would love to have Julie, Syretta, and now Geraud all introduce themselves. Maybe how long you've been with ReCity, which it sounds like since the beginning, and then why you're a ReCity member. What makes it worth it for you? Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first unless Julie or Geraud. You guys good? Okay. Syretta Hill again with StepUp Durham. We, some of you may know that there are 4 StepUps. The original StepUp ministry is in Raleigh. It's been in Raleigh for over 30 years. StepUp Durham is probably the newest StepUp. We're in our 5th year. And so when I was first introduced to Rob, we had our own space. We had a standalone space of probably about 900 square feet, but we really bought into Rob's vision of this kind of collaborative impact space, a collective impact space. And so even though we kept our own space, I started working out of ReCity probably half-time just to have a presence there and start to build relationships. And then I can't remember when, Rob, but we were still in the kind of the beginning stages of getting some stability, and we were struggling some, and we were really starting to build relationships in the community. So we just decided we should just move everything, our entire team, to ReCity. And so I want to say we did that in 2017, but I think the summer, and that it's worked out really well. We would consider PYO, Partners for Youth Opportunity, and ReCity 2 of our most strategic partners. In being in ReCity, we have so many relationships. We have people that fund us. We have a pastor who even cuts our participants' hair before they do job interviews. We have with PYO, I think, Julie, we've been working with your team to do the summer employment academy for your youth for maybe 3, or we could be in our 4th year. I'm not really sure. Geraud has come in and done some programming for us. We now have 2 ReCity partners that do all of our marketing, and our videographer who did a beautiful video for us for this last fundraiser. So we have just a ton of relationships, and ReCity is amazing about resources. Like I didn't even realize, one of my staff knew about it. One of our participants, of course, the folks that Geraud, Julie, and I serve are going to be some of the most impacted kind of during this COVID. And that's kind of played out in a lot of different ways. And we had a participant who was able to move into her new apartment, but because her hours had been reduced, she had no furniture for her and her 3 children. And so she was literally, they were all sleeping on the floor. And apparently ReCity had this resource where you could put information out on to the network. And I just started to see these random donations specifically for furniture, and in a couple of days raised hundreds of dollars just for that woman. She had to stop and physical furniture that they were dropping off. So just the ability to holistically serve people has been a real gift. So I'll stop there and let someone else speak. Did that answer your questions? I'm sorry.
I did have a question, Syretta.
Yeah.
So you moved all your staff there, but are all your operations there as well, or do you still have the old site?
No, all of our operations we had to get rid of a copier that we had a lease on, but it just made sense to streamline our finances by just sharing all of that. So we got rid of that space. And even if we in the future need to find another space because we're starting to grow, I think StepUp Durham will always have a presence at ReCity because it's that important to us.
And the people you work with flow through ReCity?
They do. So we're in we're downtown Durham, which is helpful for us because another strategic partner for us will be the shelters, Urban Ministries of Durham and Families Moving Forward. So probably about 56% of those that we serve have housing instability. Over 30% of those are coming directly from the shelters. And so they're able to walk to ReCity. And I don't know if you all have seen the pictures of ReCity. It's beautiful. Just the color scheme and just happy, which is a little different from some of the spaces that our participants are coming from. And one of the things that's not really written, but I love about ReCity is there's no culture of policing. So we have people that come in and just kind of sit and have coffee and, just have a safe, beautiful space. And no one bothers them. So that's been really helpful as well. But we love the location for that reason. People can come there, they can walk there. It's right off the bus line. And then if there are other services that we can connect them with, which typically there are, they don't have to jump on a bus and go from one place to the other. We can just make that warm handoff.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. I can go next. I'm Geraud Staton, the Executive Director of Helius. And we've also been here from the beginning. And I think sort of similar in some ways to StepUp, we had an opportunity to get our own space a while back. And myself and the board opted not to because there was no reason. One of the things that really sold me on ReCity was a quote that one of my clients said, and it was the first time that I've heard it, and I've heard it many times since then. So our organization does coaching and mentoring for necessity-driven entrepreneurs. So we do business training. We have cohorts that learn how to put their business together, their business plan, strategic planning, finances, both personal and their business finances. And we are growing steadily, and we've been here from the beginning. One of my clients came in and was sitting out in the lobby with us, and we were holding our regular meeting, and he just sort of stopped and looked around and just looked right at me and said to me, "I really like coming here. I feel like a real business person." And that was the first time I heard it, but I've been hearing it a lot since then. It's just, we're not sitting at a desk pointing across at someone, telling them things to do. We're sitting on couches and drinking coffee, and no one has walked over to get them and let them in, and it feels like equals. So the classes have really liked it. And as another testament, a lot of our clients, when they graduate our program, they actually move in and get a space themselves because they've been exposed to it. So I think, if they were coming in blind, that would be some bragging, but they have gotten to use the space a lot before they decide to pull the trigger and actually rent a desk for themselves. So we're really excited about growing here. I'm actually there now. That's the bright blue background that you see. So I'm sitting here with, I think, one other person. So I've got the world's biggest office right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, so I met Rob years and years ago. We were actually, I remember he came over and talked to my staff. We were housed out of a community center in Southwest Durham, and had been there since the late 90s. But I was just feeling excited about this idea that we could work with other people. It felt really ineffective sitting in an office with my team of 6 with the door closed, with just us looking at each other all day, and then having to run to community meetings, which is what I spent my time doing. And so that's what made us, and we want to be part of innovation, and we kind of pride ourselves on being a smaller agile organization. And so we were a good fit for a lot of reasons. And since we have been at ReCity, there's been a number of things that we've been able to do as an organization, and that I as a professional have been able to do. But I think the juice of it is that I think there's an opportunity to teach and learn from each other, and that is super important, particularly for newer leaders or folks who might be newer into the community, to kind of be surrounded by folks who have been there, done that, or understand the landscape, or can give you some context. I mean, even just like knowing like this city council person sits on this organization's board of directors. So like, this organization has the ear of this person, and this is kind of their passion. Just sharing information like that. And then all the way down to just, can I see your annual? Who do you get to do your printing stuff? Like, do you have someone who'd be a good facilitator for our board retreat? It's just all of those conversations that don't happen through email, but literally just like Geraud's heating up his lunch, and I'm like filling up my water bottle, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I get like, you got anybody? I'll send you a quick email. And then we can move fast. So I like that a lot. And I think that we hold each other accountable. That is super important to me, is that we work from a similar values base that ReCity kind of sets the tone for. And so I think it's really important as people enter that space that they understand how we approach our work, how we approach our populations that we are trying to elevate, how we treat folks. And so I like that we can challenge each other and hold each other to a high standard in that way. And then of course we get to try things, recognizing, knowing enough about one another to understand what your strengths are, so that you can think about new ways to attack issues and problems. My organization, we don't have it all figured out by any means, but anyone who spends any time with us knows that like we're laser focused on building economic, educational, and social assets for young people. Like, people understand that about us, and they understand that one of the ways that we've been most successful in that is helping young people learn how to save money for themselves and become self-determined and sustainable. And so knowing that we're an expert in that area allows an organization like StepUp to come and talk with us about like, how do you get a population that we would assume might be challenged by this idea of savings to save, and how do you do matching savings, and what financial institution do you use to do that? And so you can start to see how the shared values start to play out in the organization by using each other's strengths. So that's what keeps me coming back. And so my organization is actually getting ready to go through another merger. And, I'm so committed to the space that I'm going to stay there as an individual because I want to keep connected to the work of Durham, and I want to continue to support the vision of ReCity.
Awesome. And anyone is welcome to jump in with questions at any time. But I was going to ask if you all could share maybe an example of one of those really meaningful connections that you've made, or something that if you could think, if not for ReCity, then I may never have X, or it would have been really hard to do Y. If you all want to share an example like that.
Can I jump in first, Syretta and Geraud? Because I just want to talk about Unity now, because it's such an easy example, right? So like Rob was saying, as early adopters in the space, I came in as someone who had been in leadership the longest. I'd been in the nonprofit field since I was 19. And so Syretta, who was new to Durham, and Geraud, who was kind of building his organizations, and Rob, who was a brand new ED as well, I would get kind of taps on the shoulders like, hey, can I get 30 minutes with you to talk about development? Can I get 30 minutes to talk with you about board? I'm having problems figuring out if we should take on interns. And so after having several of those kind of taps, I thought, well, you know, how could we put something together that could support these leaders beyond just me kind of doing these 30-minute one-offs and then trying to actually mentor and coach a bunch of organizations when I really don't have the individual capacity to do that. And so long story short, I also got to go through Leadership Triangle's Transforming Leaders program, was the only nonprofit leader in the room at the time, and came back and really just was able to juice out this idea of how do we create a fellowship program to help all of these ReCity leaders learn some basic organizational stability skills. And so we created the Unity Fellowship year one, which all three of these individuals were a part of. Year two, it actually went and was housed in partnership with ReCity. We went out and we fundraised together to make that happen and offered it to more partners within the ReCity network. And then year three, we actually moved it up underneath Helius because we see it strategically aligned with also helping necessity-driven entrepreneurs, because the nonprofit landscape is not that different than the startup landscape. And so just literally from like, hey, can I get a 30-minute conversation, to now, you know, over 30 nonprofits have gone through this fellowship program that we've gotten to develop together and try and refine, and then still feel connected to each other because everyone's had the similar experience and similar information.
Well, you stole mine, so great. Nicely done. But there are plenty of examples, and I think probably one of the biggest for me as one of those young organizations is the idea that so many people pass through here that are not related to Helius, and yet we get the benefit of that. So, you know, fortunately, Mayor Schul knows, but there are plenty of founders who will come to visit PYO or StepUp or any of the other organizations, and the people here are not hoarders. And so, you know, I couldn't even tell you how many times both these organizations have come to get me when they have been in a meeting with a funder or you know, someone else that can help, to say, oh, hey, I was talking to so-and-so and I want you to meet them. And those wouldn't have happened. Those aren't things where you call someone up to say, I'm talking to someone now, but I'm going to try to send them your way. They happen because we're in the area together and we get to see how each other works, and that builds a great deal of trust. So there's no way that Helius would have been able to grow as much as we have without those connections all by itself.
And I want to say Geraud's got my Johnson Service Corps intern that I had for a year who worked at ReCity with us. And then when he had the capacity to hire someone, he took Tears Up, and she understood what Helius was about. She understood the culture of being at ReCity. She was very connected. And so she became a valuable asset, and it also continued to perpetuate her work. So just simple things like that happen all the time too.
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to narrow it down, and so I can't. So I'll mention, I guess, a couple of quick things. Things at ReCity, which I appreciate, happen really organically, and I think both Julie and Geraud kind of talked a little bit about the trust, but being able to work in the space. I think Rob often talks about proximity, right? Just the ability to really get to know and trust people, and a lot of things come out of that trust. So knowing the level of how well Julie and her team work with youth, and that they're very data driven, which we want to be more like PYO. And it's because of seeing kind of the outcomes of Julie's kids. Well, my daughter is now in it and she's loving it, Julie, by the way. Though she went in kicking and screaming, she's loving it. But because of what we've heard out from PYO, we typically work with adults, and we have a longer term program where it's family focused and kids are allowed to come to that. We've started opening up kids savings accounts because we heard from PYO kind of the impact of kids having their own accounts like at a young age. So seeing organizations do great work like that and trying to align what we're learning from them with our work, but also just again being innovative, which I think Julie mentioned. We have built a relationship with one of the church partners, and when they decided that they were going to launch a restorative housing pilot, they had someone in their church that had a number of different apartments and all of that, and because we had been good partners with them in a lot of different ways, they came to us and said, we want to support the folks that you guys are working with around housing. And so now we have a number of our folks who are working and now have housing who would not have had housing if it wasn't for this restorative housing, because they're working with people with backgrounds, they're working with people that have evictions. And I'm not going to say that it's been easy. We've had to evict people from that. But at the end of the day, being able to go back to the church and talk about what is working and what is not working and how can we do better, you can have those kinds of conversations because you have the relationship and the trust. So those would be a few things that I would kind of lift up.
Yeah, and that cross-referencing is really big. I'm, in fact, as soon as we hang up, I'm meeting with a StepUp person here out in the parking lot, actually, unless he decides to call. But we have a lot of folks from all of those programs that come into all of the other programs because we see how they operate and see how they work. So it's great.
That's awesome. And it's awesome, I think, to hear both kind of the concrete resource sharing or ideas that have emerged, but also some of those more intangible things like the trust, like the accountability. Those are huge, I think, to mention. So I want to be respectful of y'all's time. I think we asked you to commit till 1:15. So if folks have questions for Syretta, Julie, or Geraud, now is the time to ask them before they have to hop off.
I have one question. This is Cliff. If I was new coming into Durham, how would I know about ReCity, and how would I do the connect?
I can probably answer this one, but we relied mostly on word of mouth. So I think the way we talk about it is collaborative people know other collaborative people, or they wouldn't be collaborative people, right? So it's the sheer volume of Syretta, Julie, Geraud, each of their organizations simply doing their work out of ReCity brings in all the cross-pollination you could ever imagine in a single day or a single week. And so if you are looking to collaborate, you'll find us. If you're not, it might be hard, but if you're not, we're not really looking for you, right? I mean, ReCity can't be forced on anyone. It has to be sought out. And so we can't light that spark inside of an organization that says, I'm going to move from a kind of a survivalist mentality of zero-sum game of we're all going to, fight for donors and funding and have a scarcity mentality. I think that the folks that are at ReCity have I know that instinct is in all of us, but I think they've chosen to push that to the side and really more so think in terms of abundance and say, we are better together. And any amount of competition, we're going to choose to look at that and say, we're going to be able to sharpen each other and ultimately prioritize the impact we can make together. And so we haven't really had a big issue in saying there's a lot of organizations that would be a good fit for ReCity that are looking for us that can't find us.
I would want to add too that I think, where ReCity is now and where you were a year or two ago, you spent a year having community forums, right? Like I did a talk, Geraud did a talk, Housing for New Hope, and these were community roundtable discussions where they were hosted every month, and there was a different topic, and it invited community to come in. And so, you know, I think if you're thinking about starting something new, right, I think there are kind of natural evolutions of how you try to pull people into the space so that they can see it. But the most impactful thing is going to be if the people that are working in that space are getting real things done. If real change is happening, then ReCity's name and the organizations around it are going to be attached to that change. And then, just like Rob said, like the people that also want that same kind of change to happen are going to look for that. And if they're happy sitting, like we could still be at a community center, just looking at each other, just doing what we did last year over and over and over again, you know, we can choose to work that way. But the folks who are movers and shakers, I think, are work, and it's different than other co-working space, right? We have lots of other co-working spaces now, not really so much when ReCity first got started. And to some degree, you know, people go into those spaces to make connections too, but I think people understand the lens at ReCity is around equity, it's around nonprofits, and not just individuals who are trying to do more and get more for their business.
I have a question. First, are any of you natives of Durham? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, graduated from Northern High School. So I grew up in North Durham.
Okay. And the second question that I have is, so it's a co-working space, and as you know, Raleigh is up and developing. So I wanted to know what the rents were like and how do you offset? Because in Raleigh, there's a different mentality. If there's not a return on investment for developers or people with co-working spaces, then they're not up for developing something where people can't pay those top prices. So how do you all how do you all work with that as far as like the offset or having a different mentality, especially for, like Geraud said, some of his entrepreneurs that go through this program then turn out and become participants and then rent space in ReCity?
Sure. I'm happy to answer that one. I'm not sure if, I mean, Geraud, Julie, and Syretta already know where I'd be going with that, how we keep their membership rates competitive. So I can spare them. I'll let them go. If anyone has any questions for them before I begin that answer, now might be a good time to release them on with the rest of their day.
If you have a moment, you're welcome to go. If you have a moment to speak to any of the hard parts of being part of ReCity, any challenges or things that were like, ooh, this is not good, let's work on this area, because we don't want to pretend like it's all easy peasy, beautiful every day. And then feel free to hop off.
Oh, I'll start. I got so many terrible things. No, I'm just kidding. I think the same things that make it good can make it bad. And maybe that's because I am friends with Syretta and Julie, but that accountability, that is a pain in the ass sometimes. And so there's no coming in and then watching a bunch of YouTube videos that day. Like, people will come in, and it's not that anyone's checking on you, but we're all a community. And so that accountability is good, but you don't really get to coast through a day, because we also are finding that the beautiful part of our reputation here is that we have to kind of keep that up too. So, but on the other hand, we do have all each other, and there can be some distractions. And as the king of the distractors, I know how it can be being here, with it being so open, and we're not with closed soundproof doors. And so if someone's cutting up, we all sort of hear it. So, you know, if there's a negative, it's really that, like, it as focused as we can be, it can also be an easy distraction being here, especially if there's more and more people that you care about. That's a really big deal.
I would say too, just also that you are just living in constant community, you know, like, and it sometimes can get hard to stop and start because someone walks in the space that, you know, is there for a meeting or something, and they just want to have a moment just to catch up. And so you do have to just kind of, you know, you see the veterans in there. We figured out our spot to go. People have their headphones on, like, you give the visual signals that I'm not available right now for questions and conversation because I'm trying to work. And then I think it took ReCity a while to figure out the space layout. And so that was really challenging. We had big event space for a while that seemed really underutilized. And then we transitioned it. And then it felt like you didn't have a space to have large gatherings. And so kind of that push, having to work through those early years with ReCity of the push-pull of the right setup was challenging. But, you know, that was part of the work too. I don't think that you're going to lay it out and it's going to be right at the first go.
I was just going to say, you know, sometimes, which it's a gift that it's the network is growing, but also can be a pain in the butt when you're looking for parking and or you're looking to have a meeting, or you know, all of the folks that the three organizations serve have gone through some trauma at some point, and you might need to pull them to the side and have like real conversations, and that could be challenging when there's no space to really do that, because, you know, ReCity is a great space, and it's become popular, and, you know, every conference room could be filled, and there's really no nook and cranny to have those conversations. So those would be what I'd say that are the biggest challenges.
Awesome. Thank you all for your transparency and for sharing your stories. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the conversation, but we promised you 1:15 and it's 1:22. So I want to let y'all go on with your days if you need to.
Thank you guys for your time. I think, Rob, you know, if anyone has any specific questions for me, feel free to share my information.
Yeah, I just dropped mine in the chat box if anyone wants to reach out.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you, Derek and Dr. Perkins.
We had an earlier
Great.
question around rent. Was that from Wanda? Is that right? I'm happy to answer that one now. How we keep basically how do the numbers work behind the scenes around this. So we don't own our own space. We rent it. We don't receive any type of discount whatsoever. We pay market rent for a downtown Durham 12,000 square feet of commercial space. So we have committed to say that as a nonprofit, we're going to make sure that our rates are as competitive as possible for the organizations we serve, knowing that oftentimes the organizations doing the good work don't have a lot of money to be able to contribute to pay for space. And so that's the kind of the beauty of co-working, is that we can flex our model and meet you where you are. And so we've laid out a myriad of different options that come with different amenities. And so that's all just there as a pricing structure, but we also are not very rigid with that, because if someone wants to be a part of ReCity, we will bend over backwards to do whatever it takes financially to make sure that they're a part of our organization. It may not mean they get the penthouse four-person glass office suite day one, right? But if you're a hustler and you're here, and you may don't need that, right? So I think if you want to access all the ReCity resources, we've committed to doing that. And then I think as a nonprofit, we go out and we fundraise the difference, right, between what we charge and what we have to pay in rent. That's our biggest check we write every month. I'm out, and the rest of our board is out raising money because we believe in the organizations that are a part of ReCity, and we don't want them to pay an arm and a leg to have to be a part of this community. And so they're not bearing the financial burden, although we don't remove it down to zero either, because I think skin in the game is huge. It's like that gym membership that you got for free that you never show up and lift any weights, right? Like, it's got to hurt a little if you're actually gonna do it. And we want high level of ownership with our network. So it's that middle ground, right, where you're paying a rate that works for your organization, that really helps you save money with all the amenities and resources you're getting, but also you got to contribute something that represents an investment in ownership and saying, because we want people that are committed to being a part of what we're doing, and we don't want people that are just, the worst thing you could say when you're applying to join ReCity is, I'm just looking for office space. Because there are so many options you should choose besides ReCity if you're just looking for an office. Those exist. You know, ReCity is trying to build a community. ReCity is trying to build a network, and it includes office space. But if you're just looking to keep your head down and not know your neighbor, you really should go somewhere else, and we'll help you find that spot. But it wouldn't be us.
Rob, this is Cliff. Your board is made up of what disciplines? And so just talk a little bit about the board.
Sure. Our board of directors kind of represents our network in many ways. ReCity tries to pull together 3 different types of community leader, primarily the nonprofit leader. We just did a recent audit of our network. About 54% of our partners are from the nonprofit sector, 30% are from the business space, and then the remaining percentage is from faith communities. And so our board is very much reflective of that type of diversity. We've got faith leaders on the board, we've got business leaders, we've got people with nonprofit experience, all kind of helping to guide our mission forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Dr.
Yeah, Rob, what are you selling to when you go out fundraise, right? What are people like contributing to, and who are those folks?
Yeah, great question. I think that we're selling shared impact and systemic change. You know, we're sharing, we're selling disruption in many ways of the status quo. We're saying one organization at a time is not going to do what is needed to really move the needle on systemic poverty and injustice in our communities. But together, I think we can make much more of a dent. And so I think in many ways, it is both a blessing and a curse to fundraise for ReCity, because it's not every kind of donor. You know, I think the folks that are looking for the emotional stories, you just talk to them, right? Yeah. Because they're the ones that can sell, oh, I'm going to tell you about a life transformed, right? We're very much an infrastructure investment. You know, invest in the systemic infrastructure needed to equip the on-the-ground leaders to do what they're best positioned to do. But that's almost, it's in some ways, some people can hear that as overhead. I don't believe it is, but some people can say, oh, I don't want to invest in don't tell me about, I don't want my money going to a building. Like, well, what happens if a building helps make healthy? I mean, at what point do we need to rethink our giving strategies there? So not every donor is a ReCity donor. I think more often than not, are the folks that really have the eyes to see our framework are people who are looking to invest in systemic change on maybe a citywide level, kind of ecosystem building level. And that is not, I would say, most individual donors. Most individual donors want to give money to Syretta, Julie, or Geraud. And I think it takes maybe a unique type of donor to be able to see, oh, the amplifying effect of, oh, if I invest in ReCity, that's actually going to be like helping 45 organizations get stronger all at once. But it comes without kind of the stories that are more, we're one layer removed, right, from what Syretta shared of that the individual client that was able to get a house full of furniture filled, right? You know, those stories happen all across the way of our network, but because we're one instance removed from that, oftentimes we're having to play catch up on telling those stories, and they're really a shared story. It's not just a ReCity story. There's a lot of people that contributed to that. And so it can be challenging from a fundraising perspective, but I believe in the people that you just talked to, and I want to make them have a greater impact. And so we have made it work to date, and we're going to be committed to continue to try to raise the money we need to give them more support.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Rob, I have a question. You've mentioned the network a few times, and I've heard it from the guests that just left. So is the network basically those who are housed at ReCity, or does it also include those who are not housed?
It primarily refers to those who are accessing our physical space in some way. Now, that question, I need to give it a little bit of a disclaimer now because of COVID. We have we're starting to build out what it looks like to be a virtual member of the ReCity Network, which is something that we've never really committed a lot of time to. But when you boil it down, ReCity is not just a space. ReCity is a network of people, and we can still very much build people's capacity in quarantine without physical space. Now, I'm excited for physical space to come back because I believe it is a necessary tool and is so huge. But for the Zoom call we're doing right now, we're taking a lot of our resources and our capacity building services, our networking resources, and putting them online and making them available virtually. And so we're kind of redefining right now what it means to be a member of our network and expanding that definition a little bit. It used to mean in some way you were using our space, but now we're going to say it means you're committed to running with us and building community with us, even if it doesn't mean you need physical space. Because I think that even when we return from COVID, the virtual build out that we will have done during this time is not going to go away. It's actually only going to enhance the physical, and they're going to be a very strong 1-2 punch, because bumping into someone at a coffee bar at ReCity is nice, but you can't rely on that being the only way that you build community, right? There has to be intentional leveraging of technology to amplify the accidental connections that you'll have in person. But I think both are very much needed. So we have a network application. You have to apply to join, and just wanting to wave money in our face and say, we'll pay you for office space is not enough to get you ReCity membership. We want to know, we want to do a deep dive on your organization. We want to know if you're value aligned. We want to know what kind of neighbor you're going to be in our space. And then we accept applicants on a rolling basis.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question to that, because I think the physical space it seems like it's very much a contributory aspect of the network. So when you started off, what was the expectation or the strategies around the type of space, the location of the space, how much space, in order to make this work?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot that I could say there. I think succinctly, we talked to the people that you just spoke to, and we asked them what kind of space they needed to run their programming, and what are they looking for out of a space. And so it was a lot of kind of market research, right? And our market was the nonprofit leader, right? The social entrepreneur, the faith leader who is serving their community faithfully, and just asking them what are their pain points and how we might envision the layout of a physical space, where it would need to be located, how big it would need to be, and how it would be situated. And that has evolved over time as our network has grown. So it's very much listening to the community and what would cause them to want to join forces with us. And so I think that we leaned heavily on the folks that moved in earliest, but then as other people, I was constantly just trying to be out in the community asking, what would it look like? How would you see this as a valuable investment of your time? And what could we do what could we offer out of this space to get you to be a part of this? But it was definitely much of an uphill battle, because Durham didn't have a framework for this. To my knowledge, the Triangle doesn't really have a history of kind of using a shared space in the same way that ReCity has done. Nationally and even globally, there is precedent for this, but in many ways you were trying to sell the car to people who thought they needed a faster horse. That's something Henry Ford used to say when there was no car. You kind of had to educate people on why they needed it. And I think now that we have a space in Durham we can point to, it is a little easier to share the story externally in other communities, because you can point to the impact that we're having.
I think at this point, I was curious to hear from Cliff, Angela, Wanda, Denise, Dr. Brookins, Ani, any of you about kind of where your head is at, whether you're feeling like this could provide some value in Raleigh. If you're having some hesitations, like what are those hesitations? What questions would you have? Like who else needs to be part of this conversation? Because I think SEV is interested and sees some value, but we aren't going to go out there and try and pursue this unless we know that this is a good thing to pursue in conjunction with our community partners and community members.
Kristen, I have a quick question. I know that, Rob, you're looking to expand into Raleigh. How far, or I suppose, would it be based on the success of Raleigh? Would you be considering expanding beyond Raleigh into our other eastern towns like Nightdale, for example?
Yeah, it's good. I think the phrasing is very important here. What I said on the last call was that the ReCity essentially is a framework. And so it's a framework that is fueled by community leadership. And so, the people that you're able to talk to are the reason that I'm talking to you now. I mean, it doesn't work unless a community really invites the model in and really customizes the model to meet their needs, because your community. And so we have, when I took this job, I actually was living in Southeast Raleigh on Raleigh Boulevard. And so for me, the opportunity I saw was I wanted to bring this to my neighborhood. I wanted my neighborhood to benefit from the shared impact, because I saw people doing good work, but also doing it in isolation in Raleigh the same way that they were doing it in Durham. And so my desire has always been, I would love to see this kind of come full circle and be happening, because I'm born and raised in Raleigh. And I think we've seen initial success with Durham, and that was my task, was to take and apply this to Durham. But we're definitely open. We're in conversations with people outside of North Carolina right now, and it's really more so, how can we make this playbook available to you so that you could take this and run with it, even if you don't call it ReCity, even if it's not, we're not really even interested in it being called ReCity outside of the triangle, because we can't really have that level of control and make sure that it's a quality product that is value aligned with what we're doing. So we're trying to be as generous as we can to share this story with whoever wants to make it happen in their community. And if they do, then they can take it and run with it, and we'll be able to walk alongside them and help them do that. And in the triangle, I think we're open to going wherever community leaders see that this could be viable and add value. But I think it is very much you can't force this model on a community. It has to be something the community says we're going to pursue. And I think that you talk to some of the folks that were a part of that origin story for Durham, and if there's, there isn't really a perfect number of people that make that happen, because it depends on what the community needs. It depends on how big a space that you would look for. And there's a lot of logistics that go into that, but it definitely is something that can be adaptable and flexible to a lot of different contexts. And I don't think Durham is alone in having redundancy of effort because of silos, right? Durham, that's not a unique problem to Durham. That's a problem that exists everywhere. And it might take a different flexibility in how you take this framework and apply it based on what those root causes are to the problems in that community.
I like that, what you said, because I think initially after the GNLA cohort met and it was a part of our initial meeting, we needed a framework. We had an idea. We wanted to come together, wanted to take everything that we all were doing as alums and find a space and take all our own nonprofit ideas and go out to the community and serve. And so ReCity is doing, I think, exactly, and Heathcliff, you can respond. Our initial idea was to do what you're doing, but we didn't have a framework for it. We had meetings, we put it on a whiteboard, we kind of shaped it, we put some ideas out there, but we didn't know what it would look like. But I do like the fact that, like you said, we don't want to be redundant. We don't want to have to build the whole thing over, which you've already done. We can just take the ideas that we have as nonprofits and has critical service organizations and kind of replicate what you've done in Raleigh. And our initial concept was to bring to Southeast Raleigh. That's something that we discussed. But Heathcliff, if you were at those couple of meetings we had after GNLA, after we had our graduation and we had those discussions, I think this is similar to what we kind of discussed.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Angela. We were close in our thinking. We just did not have the means to move it forward, or that we didn't have an example that we could really draw from. I think this was the first time that I saw an example that would fit well with us. Of course, I I look at the space over at General Assembly, and it just did not have the same mix. And I think because of the impact that we were very closely associated with, this model seems to be more of what we wanted to do. Now, my thinking is, again, would be, where would that space be in order to pull in the east? Or would we have to do a southeast as our initial take, and then maybe think in the future about the east, and maybe not including the both? But I would agree that that's where we were headed, and I still feel that we can get there. We just need to sit down and put it on a plan.
I think just to clarify one thing there is, I would say that I would encourage, or I think I've just observed that it's incredibly difficult. When ReCity first started, there were some programmatic aspects to what we were doing. We essentially were trying to start basically everything I've already shared with you, and also a mentoring program at the same time, and found out very quickly we couldn't be a partner and this has to be our program. And so I think just to name that whatever you decide to do in learning from this model and applying it to your community, and how involved you would like ReCity to be in that process, I would just have an honest understanding, maybe hearing from me, that it would be incredibly difficult to do it if you also are currently a service provider of some way, shape, and form, to add this as an additional job. I think it really is its own job. So it doesn't mean you have to work with ReCity to do this, but I would advise against adding it onto your plate if you're already serving the community directly by providing a service, and trying to basically have two jobs. It doesn't really work. Not to mention the fact that kind of to be that convening agency, to be able to pull people together, you can't really be one of them either, right? You kind of have to be a bridge builder, and it's just a lot harder when you are limited by your sector and the connections that represents, and you're just incredibly busy doing the work you're already doing. And so just making sure that you're counting that cost up front, that if I were to do it eyes wide open again, I would drop that mentorship program before day one, right? We did it really soon after, but could have saved some headaches in the first 6 months or so, when it was just really confusing and difficult to try to navigate both being a service provider and also trying to create this infrastructure at the same time.
Yeah, Rob, I agree with you. And that was the reason I asked about the mix of the board, because my thinking is if we put together a board that would particularly do most of that planning, such that no one organization would have two roles or play two roles, because it would take some time, and I was just concerned about maybe using the board to do some of that.
We have just a couple minutes left, so if Wanda or Denise wanted to add any comments. I think Denise was going to speak a couple minutes ago. I don't know if she still is holding on to that thought. Okay. But yeah, I wanted to see kind of what next steps are. Maybe Cliff, Wanda, Derek, you're all on the Crosby Executive Committee meeting, so I don't know if this should be on the agenda for next time to kind of talk about takeaways, share back with the other committee members, and then figure out a next step, or do we go ahead and plan something? What are y'all thoughts? And or Rob, if you have recommendations for how to proceed.
Well, I guess I have one question. Well, I have a lot of questions, but I'll ask this one. So, because it appears as if, and Rob can probably help with this as well, because there's got to be an anchor group, I think, to kind of help get this started. similar to what the setup that Rob has, his board, and that kind of makes it happen. So is SEV planning or wanting to be that anchor group, or Wake County wanting to be that anchor group, or would we have to go out and establish?
I think that's a great question that we have not, we're kind of on this journey with you. We have no set plan for where we're going. So I think we have agreed to kind of help initiate the conversation. I think it's up to you all along with us to think about, as Rob said, if we want to just adapt ReCity to Raleigh and figure out if there is a group that wants to host it. I don't think Social and Economic Vitality is probably the right group to be the backbone either, because we are government and we know all of the challenges that come with being government. Or if we want to work with Rob to really expand ReCity as their model exists into Raleigh. I think we are flexible in what that looks like if you all think it's worth continuing to talk about. Does that answer your question, Derek? That I don't have the answer?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, what comes first, the chicken or the egg. So I'm just trying to figure out, the next steps here. Because I think what can happen, in the meantime, is that I think there does need to be some conversations with some groups or organizations that buy into this vision. And I think that's going to be very important, because I'm just going to put it out there, and and I'm sure there's many folks on the Zoom call that may attest to this. For as long as I've been here, one of the issues that we always seem to have, that we just can't get around, is that we have a lot of organizations. We have globs of organizations in Wake County, and very little of them don't like to play with each other in sandbox. There is this air of territorial domain that exists, and I'm not going to share because you may take away from me, and I can't afford to give away to you, kind of thing. And that's and it's pervasive, but that's not to say that there are some groups, and there are probably others who do have those types of relationships and want to do shared impact and collective impact, and would probably look to do that. And it makes sense to me for those organizations who went through the grassroots leadership to kind of help to kind of start to change their mindset around doing that, because they really can make an impact based on just how they come together to do the things that they have already been committed to doing, and having gone through a shared experience in that training. So I think it's going to be important to identify and to have those deep, clear, and concise conversations with folks that this is what it's going to take, and people have to really be committed to doing
that. I think along with that, Derek, is one thing that I've heard Rob and one of the other members say is the shared values. Because if you don't have those shared values, then that shared workspace and accountability is going to mean nothing. So I definitely think that shared values is a key in making it work.
And I think that really essentially is the two paths that you have in front of you, that it's ultimately this group and however many others that are involved in the process. I think that might simplify it down quite a bit. Is just, we're in conversations right now with other entities, in cities across the country. And it's more so, do you want to use ReCity's playbook and have ReCity help you run it? Or do you just want to look to the playbook and kind of build your own thing? And I think those are the two options. If you see validity in the model, then it really just comes down to, what is ReCity's role in helping you ignite this spark and fanning it into flame? Do you want, because I think both of those come with different pros and cons, right? Or depending on how you view different things. But I think using ReCity's model officially would be, hey, we're going to work with you as partners, but we're going to lean on you to be able to help make those initial connections, but we're going to handle a lot of the logistical infrastructure that you don't have to recreate. And we'll be walk through it from end to end, and we'll take the financial, responsibility of a space and burden on ourselves, so the free you just do what you do, versus taking the higher degree of ownership and risk on yourselves to be able to build out the capacity to do it kind of with our, advice on the front end, but really not walking through it with you over the course of time. We're taking that journey fully. So I think that kind of, I think, is the most fundamental question, because then it helps shape how much you want the nature of our relationship with you, and whether or not you want us to be a kind of a co-author in this story or not.
Wondering how you determine the success rate of what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that you stated your mission statement, maybe I missed it, about wanting to change systemic policies in various entities in Durham. But how is that success rate determined by the various networking organizations that are renting space in one city?
Sure. So just to clarify, I think it might be helpful. So our mission statement actually is building capacity to drive collective impact. So that is the mission statement you'll find on our website. When you ask me kind of at our root, what are we about? What is our end game? I think systemic poverty was what I was mentioning earlier, not policy. So we're not positioned to really, although I think that is necessary. We're not a 501c4. We're not doing political advocacy per se. Although we talk very openly about the importance that advocacy plays in addressing things like poverty. So just one little clarifier there. But we measure success in two primary ways. One is, are we making each organization stronger themselves, and are they reporting stronger shared impact? So it speaks to individual health of organizations. Are they reporting being in a better place, a more stable place, a more impactful place themselves? Does Syretta say StepUp Durham is better today than 4 years ago when they were without ReCity? That we study that and measure that every year through survey data. And then the collective impact question of, are your community partnerships strengthening as a result of being at ReCity and being a part of the network? And so those are the two primary statistics that we study. There are others, but those are the two categories that we really look at to say, is ReCity actually adding value, or is everyone doing the same thing they would have done on their own? I think you heard, anecdotally speaking, our partners say that they are stronger, but we also don't leave it to just storytelling. We ask them those questions via survey on a regular basis to be able to have them report out whether we are actually moving the needle.
I also think it's a concept that's used in civic engagement. I specifically work in the area. And when you go from state to state, what they do is they build tables. They build tables of organizations that do civic engagement. And that's how, when the work comes down or the funds comes down, that's how they divide and conquer, with making their state reach a certain percentage of registered voters, or whatever the issue is that they're doing, trying to reach whatever the percentage is for the census or so forth. It's developing a table and a coalition or of partners that spread out and do the work. The difference is they're not housed in the same place. And I think those relationships being in the same place a lot of times are more fluid, because you're seeing those people on a regular basis. So you really get to really know them.
Yeah.
Definitely when you compare it to the task force model, right, which is, I think, more of the more popular version of, we're going to collaborate, but collaboration means we're going to come together for a quarterly meeting, and just how slow change happens at that pace, and how hard it is to build trust with 4 meetings a year, not to mention if everyone's not even consistently attending those meetings, and knowing that the real work has to happen at the coffee machine, right, day to day, and finding that time to get FaceTime. You just can't skip that step. You just can't. Relationships aren't authentic. I don't care whether your logos are on each other's website or what. Collaboration in its true form is people knowing each other on a first name basis, knowing about each other's kids, knowing each other's stories, and really knowing that they're truly value aligned. And so I think that, if anything, we know that people can form relationships without a ReCity model, but it's more like an accelerant, right? It's like pouring gas on a fire that was already going to burn, but it's just going to burn faster and for longer when you create the conditions where those logs are pushed together in close proximity, right? You know, because the best way to put out a fire is to spread out the logs. That's how you do it. That's Boy Scout 101, right? You just separate the logs and the fire goes out fast. It's harder to put out a fire when all those logs are burning together. And I think that's a great metaphor for what ReCity does.
Cool. And my one last thought is, I think we will lean on you all a lot, the folks on this call, for figuring out if we're going to keep this conversation going, who needs to be at the table. Because I know, Wanda, you brought up on a couple calls recently, like, what community are we talking about? Are we talking about Old Raleigh? Are we talking about New Southeast Raleigh? And all of those organizations that are out there on the ground that we may not be connected to, that they are part of this early, so that they are part of the building those shared values, so that those don't get built and then they get invited in and they're like, no, I don't want to be a part of that, you know? I think that is important to me, that we do that from the get-go. So that's where we'll need y'all's help in setting that table. Awesome. I think that is it. We're 10 minutes over. I'm not doing good on my time on my meetings recently, last night or today. But I thank you all for being here today. It sounds like maybe we will chat about this next at the Crosby Executive Committee meeting. If we have any thoughts before then, I can send this out to y'all. And please feel free, if you have thoughts after this call, to send me an email or questions or whatever. That'd be awesome. And thank you, Rob, so much for being on today and for having a real conversation with us about what this could look like.
Absolutely. Just happy to continue the conversation based on what the group wants to do, and be a resource in whatever way I can be helpful. Thank you for each of what you do to serve the community.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon and good.
Thanks, Kristen.
Mm-hmm. Let me stop this recording.